Hello, and welcome back. I'm Odie, your operatic Italian tutor. Today we're going to be analysing another wonderful piece, and this one is a very, very fun piece. It's called Le Violette by Alessandro Scarlatti. So, let's get right into it. So, let's read about the context, because that's always very important. Le Violette. This is a short pastoral aria from Alessandro Scarlatti's opera Pirro e Demetrio. It is not tied to a heavy dramatic moment, but serves a reflective, intimate pause. The text addresses violets as symbols of modesty and hidden beauty, as well as women, in this case. Their shy presence rebukes the singer's own bold desires, and we'll get to that later. The atmosphere is gentle, and the focus is not on plot necessarily, but rather on grace, restraint, and the contrast between quiet purity and human desire. So, let's start by reading. So, rugiadose, odorose, violette graziose. Voi vi state vergognose, mezzo ascose fra le foglie, e sgridate le mie voglie che son troppo ambiziose. That's it. Short and sweet. Now, let's have a look at the translation. Dewy, fragrant, violets graceful. You there are bashful, half hidden between the leaves, and you scorn my desires, which are overly ambitious. Now, what's the point of this text? Because that's a good question, right? It's not entirely clear why someone would be talking to flowers. I mean, what's the entire point? So we have a heavy contrast here. So on the one hand, let's use this color. So we have rugiadose, odorose, graziose. We're talking about a flower here in a very beautiful way. So rugiadose, odorose, graziose. Something very beautiful, something very elegant, something very charming. And indeed, we have the word graceful, fragrant, dewy. Now, dewy in this case, when, in the morning when there's still quite a bit of humidity and it's still cold, the little droplets on the leaves and the flowers, that's dew. So that's what we're referring to here. So, you there are bashful. So this is a contrast, but it's also complementary, because these little flowers are so beautiful, delicate, and they're so bashful and shy and timid. So, again, vergognose, bashful, mezzo ascose fra le foglie, so half hidden between the leaves, right? So, hidden. But, you, little flowers, are so pretty, so beautiful, so charming, yet you scorn my desires, which are overly ambitious. Now, so let's use a different color. Sgridate le mie voglie, che son troppo ambiziose. Now, it doesn't take a genius to understand that these desires, wink, wink, nod, nod, they're of a sexual nature. So there's two ways to read this, essentially, because we're not really singing this in the context of the opera. But in any case, it's either you little flowers, and let's just leave it at that, flowers, are so very beautiful and pretty and charming, and you scorn my desires, and here's the big contrast once again, which are overly ambitious. What desires are these? Sexual, purely sexual. I want you. And when you understand that he's not necessarily, the singer here is not necessarily talking to the flowers themselves, but rather to, beautiful young women, which are very charming, very modest, very bashful, shy, and all the rest of it. On the one hand, you have the beautiful. On the other hand, you have the brutish, the lustful, almost, the overly ambitious desires. So there's a big contrast here. Now, there's not very much to say from a vocabulary and grammar point of view, but let's read it nonetheless. So, as we said, rugiadose, rugiada is dew. In this, you wouldn't quite say this in modern Italian, but yes, rugiadose, full of dew, dewy, if you will. Odorose, odore literally means odor. In this case, it's fragrant, because traditionally, wild varieties of violets are fragrant. The ones we have in our gardens nowadays, not so much, but that's a different story. Vergognose. Now, vergognoso can either mean shameful, so I did something vergognoso, something shameful, something that causes shame. I should be ashamed of myself for what I did. Or, in this case, it can also mean bashful, and that you're very reserved, you're timid, you're shy, embarrassed perhaps as well. Not necessarily in this context, but it could indeed mean that as well. Now, ascose. What is this? This is one of those cases where we have a verb from Old Italian. So the verb would be ascondere. The modern verb is nascondere, and it means to hide. So mezzo ascose fra le foglie. You're hidden between the leaves. And sgridate, sgridare. Now, gridare in modern Italian means to shout. Sgridare in here means you scorn. So you scorn my overly ambitious desires. So that is all we have regarding the vocabulary and grammar notes. A few pronunciation notes. Rugiadose, j, rugiadose. The G here is pronounced as j, because it's followed by a front vowel, E. So rugiadose, not rugiadose, no, rugiadose. Graziose, graziose, not graziose, no, graziose, z. Foglie, foglie, gli. Remember, GL followed by an E or an I or an E, so E or E, gives us L. Essentially, when you have a front vowel following the GL, you have the GL cluster, you have a L sound. Voglie, once again, L. Not voglie, careful here, voglie. Esgridate le mie voglie, not esgridate le mie voglie. Voglie, long as well. Ambiziose, same as before, z, not ambiziose, no, ambiziose. And that's essentially it. But there's a little something which I think is worthwhile noticing. So let's have a look at this is the generic Schirmer's edition that I also use in the booklet, and this is what most people use when they first encounter these pieces. So let's look at okay, so the word grazioso is grazioso, and it's not grazioso, but ta-ta-tam pam pam pa pa pam pam yam pam 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 graziose ta-ta-ta-tam. It's 4 different notes. In reality, you wouldn't say grazioso, you'd say grazioso. But for the music's sake here, we change the way we pronounce this and we read this. Also, it's not violetta, 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 but ta-da-dam pam pararam pam, violette, vio, and not violette. It just doesn't work here. So you change the way you read this for the sake of the music. And we have another little example and a phrase later on. I mean, whenever you have this graziose, violette, you have the same pattern, ta-ta-ta-ta. So 4 syllables. But let's... So here... Ta 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 pa 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 pam. Che son troppo ambiziose. But again, this is strange, because you would read this, che son troppo ambiziose, and not che son troppo... sorry, you would read this as che son troppo ambiziose, and not che son troppo ambiziose, ta 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 ta. No, ambiziose, ambiziose. But again, for the music's sake here, we changed this. And there's another little example. Okay, yes, here. Sono troppo ambiziose. Sono troppo ambiziose. You wouldn't say that. You would say che sono troppo ambiziose. Che sono troppo ambiziose. But again, for the music's sake, we changed the way we read this. And it's important to know that, again, we've said this in other videos as well, but sometimes the music is more important than the words, and sometimes the words are more important than the music. So the text is more important than the music. But this is one of those cases where, in order to accommodate the music, we slightly change the way we sing. So let's read from the beginning once again, carefully, with precision, impeccable pronunciation, and full of meaning. So, let's go. Rugiadose, odorose, violette, graziose. Voi vi state vergognose, mezzo ascose fra le foglie, e sgridate le mie voglie, che son troppo ambiziose. A rather straightforward text, but it's a very, very fun text to sing. Now, one little thing I'd like to say before concluding is the following. Try doing this, and I'll try getting my point across. This text could very easily be transformed, the music with this rhythm and as is, could be transformed into something completely different just by changing the text. So here, rugiadose, odorose, violette, graziose. Oh, how beautiful, it's little flowers, it's cute, it's adorable, and all the rest of it. But with the same rhythm, it could turn into something completely different. So, I don't know. Or si muore per la morte. Per la patria, yes. Or si muore per la patria. Per la patria. Or si muore, per la patria or si muore. E la morte s'avvicina, whatever. What I'm singing right now is, and now we die for the motherland. Okay? What else did I say? And now death approaches. It could work just fine. But you wouldn't sing it the same way, would you? There's nothing inherently flowery. Yeah, there's nothing inherently cute about this music. I mean, yes, if you play it in a very cute way, yeah, okay. But again, you need to understand what's going on in order to make these interpretive decisions. So it's very important that you understand what you're saying. I keep on saying the same thing over and over again. But how would you know what's going on if you don't understand what you're singing? You simply cannot. So this is all regarding our Violette by Scarlatti. Now, this is a video of a short 10-part series in which I analyze 10 of the most commonly sung beginner arias of the repertoire. They're all found in my booklet, which you can download for free, links down below. However, this is just the starting point. This is a very good way, a very good introduction for anyone who wants to learn more about how operatic Italian itself works, and if you want to sing with meaning and impeccable pronunciation, You need to understand what you're singing. You need to learn the language. If you're interested, I offer one-to-one lessons. We focus exactly and entirely on what you need based on your current repertoire and your current knowledge and what your ambitions and desires are. So if you're interested, check my website down below. That's all for today, and see you next time.